Hello BookTube! This is Breckie from Breckie Writes, this is Breckie Reads, and this is my summer book haul. Now, I am collapsing all of the books that I have purchased so far from the end of June, all of July, and now into August. I'm going to do a book haul of all of them, partially because I'm going back on a book buying ban. Basically, I have purchased a whole bunch of books. My TBR stack is about 40 some now, and I need to, you know, maybe not totally kill my bank accounts. Now, with the book buying ban that I am imposing as of this video, I plan to not buy any more books that aren't already in a series. So if I have the first of a series, I can continue on. If it's a pre-order I already have placed, I can continue with that. But aside from those, no more books for a while. Doesn't matter if they're used, doesn't matter if they're book outlet, like I need to get through some of these books before I add, because I actually have no more room on my bookshelf shelves. So, without further ado, here are the 22 books I've gotten this summer. So the first 5 I'm going to talk about are all comic bind-ups. So 2 of the comic bind-ups that I got in June were Fables Volume 1 and Fables Volume 2. And the Fables run follows fable characters, so fairy tale and fable characters who are living in New York City, and the big bad wolf, who is this character, is kind of become a film noir, seedy kind of detective, and the fable characters have been exiled from their homeland and are now having to live in our world, and it's just complicated and kind of messy. Here is what some of the art looks like. It's really just an interesting look into fairy tale retellings, and it's not strictly fairy tales. It has like Little Boy Blue, and it has Bluebeard, and it has Snow White, and the Big Bad Wolf. It's all these different characters having to kind of eke out lives in our world and what that looks like. The third comic bind-up that I got from the same comic book store called Heroes in Campbell, California was Bitchplanet. This is the first volume. The second volume doesn't come out until September, so obviously it's a continuation of a series, so I get to continue it. And this takes place in the future in which women who do not like to follow the rules are sent to a prison planet. Basically, it's kind of like Orange is the New Black meets like Star Trek in the future. I haven't actually read this yet. I've been saving it for the perfect moment, but I will be getting to this very soon. And here is some of the artwork. I will say that there is definitely a fair amount of nudity in this, so you might want to keep that in mind if you decide to pick this one up. Alright, the last 2 were comic bind-ups that I ordered from the internet. The first one is the first volume of Faith. Faith is an overweight superhero, and she's big and proud and fabulous, and I'm really excited. I actually don't really read superhero comics that much, but I'm making an exception for her to see how they handle the weight issues, so I am excited to read this one. And then I also ordered volume 4 of the Lumberjanes. I'm very excited to read this. I ordered both Faith and Lumberjanes from Amazon. I love, love, love the Lumberjanes, and I'm excited to see where their adventures go. The next 2 books both came from Little Shop of Stories in Decatur, Georgia. It's my favorite independent bookstore in the world. It is such a great place. It specializes in children's fiction, and it's whimsical, and they have all kinds of books there, and it's just a great place. So if you live in or around Atlanta, go check out Little Shop of Stories. It's on the square in Decatur. They're fabulous. I love them. And I picked up The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, which I have already finished. I've actually read the entire Raven cycle because I have no self-control. Loved it. Really, really enjoyed this one. And this is about the 4 boys. You've got Ronan, Noah, Gansey, and Adam, and then they befriend a girl named Blue, who's the daughter of psychics, and there's ley lines and hunting a dead Welsh king, and it's creepy and wonderful, and like, there were real tears in this series, and it's fantastic, and I loved it. I also picked up a book I have not read, and that is Some Kind of Happiness by Claire Legrand. This is the middle grade story about a girl named Finley who is sent to live with her grandparents while her parents are kind of working out some problems. She's very introverted, she kind of retreats to the world of the stories that she creates, and then she discovers that the forest surrounding her grandparents' house is enchanted. I am very excited to pick this one up, and I just love this cover. I will say this was definitely a cover buy. I was drawn to this cover. I really liked the blurb on the inside, so I will tell you guys how this one goes. The next book is the only book that I did not purchase for myself. This one was given to me by one of my aunts who is totally in love with Outlander, and I don't know if I will actually read this. I have a couple of friends that I think would enjoy it a lot more than me, but it is called finding Fraser, and I think the story is that a woman who's like 30 and her life is kind of boring and falling apart decides to just go to Scotland in search of her own Jamie Fraser. I suspect that this probably started as fan fiction and then became a published book. I don't know if this is the kind of thing that I would enjoy. It's not really my genre, but I do have a couple of friends. My friend Mary has really loved Outlander, so I might give this to her. But yes, I did receive this book over the summer, so I'm hauling it to show you, but I'm not 100% sure that I will read it, because romance novels that are strictly romancy are not always the ones I read, so we'll see. When I was visiting one of my aunts in Richmond, we drove over to Charlottesville and we were hanging out downtown. We checked out Monticello, and we also ducked into a used bookshop when it was raining. That's a dangerous place for me to be. And it was called Read It Again, Sam. I think that is the cutest name for a bookshop. It had an incredible variety of used books, including some really rare first editions and collector's items. No, I didn't get any of those because money and also taking them on the plane, but I did pick up 3 more books. The first one I grabbed was Gods and Generals. This is by Jeff Shaara. Jeff Shaara is actually the son of Peter Shaara, I think is his first name, who wrote The Killer Angels, which is a really famous, well-known Civil War trilogy. And Gods and Generals tells a story of where the major generals of the Union and the Confederacy were as the Civil War began to happen, as all the politics lined itself up and who came to be on what side and why it kind of panned out the way that it did. I read the first 2 chapters of this and I am excited to continue with it, although I think I will go slowly. I am writing a book about the Civil War and I figured reading some fiction set during the Civil War would be a good thing to get my mind around, you know, kind of the world creation that historical writers do rather than fantasy writers, which is what I'm most familiar with. So I'm glad to have picked this one up. Then I picked up The Lightning Thief by Riordan. This is the first book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. I've been wanting to read this for a while. I was hoping to get to it last month and it didn't quite work out. And it takes place in a world in which the Greek gods still exist. They still continue to have children with humans, so there are these sort of like half-gods running around. I believe Percy Jackson is one of them, and there's like a Camp Half-Blood where they all hang out or something. That's about all that I know of the series. I am excited to read it. I'm glad I have the first one. It will give me the impetus to pick up the series and get reading. And the last book I got at Read It Again, Sam was The Last Werewolf by Glen Duncan. I have already talked about how excited I am to read this book in August. I will be doing a buddy read with my friend Caitlin, and if you have it and you want to read it, join us. This is the sort of dark, seedy story of the last werewolf. He is like 200 and some years old. He's very fit, he's very handsome, and I believe we open with him getting the news that the only other werewolf in existence has been murdered. And so now he kind of has to figure out what he's gonna do. I've heard that it's sexy, I've heard that it's a little bit violent, I've heard that there's some horror elements, and for some reason, man, I am on the creepy train. Like, give me all the creepy books. So I'm very excited to check this out. There is these sort of wine blood red in pages and this beautiful moon gold foil. I just love it. I find this cover so aesthetically pleasing. I can't even tell you. I love this so much, so I'm very excited to pick this one up. And then we have the only pre-order of the summer, and that was This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. I actually have never read any Victoria Schwab or V.E. Schwab, so I'm very excited to pick this one up. It is a story of Kate Harker, who is a rebellious teenage girl who has a bad relationship with her family, and August Flynn, who is a monster, but I think he looks like a teenage boy, but he's a monster. And the two of them become friends, and it's surrounds that. One of the things that has been really interesting about this duology, because it's only going to be 2 books in this series, is that it centers around their friendship and that it's not going to be a romance-driven plot. So I'm really curious how a YA manages to handle a friendship-driven plot and not a romance-driven plot. So I am really, really excited to pick this one up soon. Then I picked up Sleeping Giants by Sylvan Neuvel. Now this came from Book of the Month, although this cover does not have the Book of the Month logo, which I find surprising. But this was my last Book of the Month book. I had to suspend my subscription because 1, I have like 40 unread owned books, and that's a little bit excessive, and 2, money. So this is the last Book of the Month club book I'll have for a while. I also find this a really, really pleasing cover. The black and the blue just are gorgeous together. This is cool, but wait, this book gets even cooler because this comes off. And oh my gosh, there's this like crazy hand with like some symbols and like an eye. And then on the back, there's a crazy face. That is bonkers. This is a story of a girl named Rose who, when she is a child, falls into like a well or a pit, and when they find her, she's sitting in a giant metal hand, like she's just sitting in the hand. It fast forwards to her being an adult. She's become a scientist. They're researching these giant metal hands and they're trying to figure out why they're there. That's all that I know about it. It definitely sounds kind of like Pacific Rim, but instead of like monsters coming from the ocean, it's giant metal giant things in the earth. I don't know anything about it other than that. It sounds intriguing. I know it's the beginning of a series, which I'm not as excited about because waiting is the worst, but I am really curious. I've heard great things about it and I'm excited to pick this one up. All the rest of the books I've gotten this summer have all been from 3 different orders from Book Outlet. They ran a couple of specials this summer. There's a couple of books that I've been eyeing, and as soon as they hit the Book Outlet virtual shelves, I had to get them. The first one being Lily King's Euphoria. This is a story of some anthropological researchers in like Papua New Guinea. I think there's 3 of them, a married couple and then a single individual guy, and the wife of the married couple and that single guy kind of have an affair, and I think that this is kind of looking at people, and then looking at themselves. I think that's really all I know about the plot. Olive from A Book Olive really enjoyed this, and I think Eleanor Reads maybe read this and really enjoyed it, and I respect both of those ladies' opinions, so I have picked it up. And this is outside of my comfort zone of reading. This is not the kind of thing I normally reach for, but I am trying to read a little bit more broadly, so Euphoria by Lily King. Then, this should come as no surprise to anybody, I had to pick up Truthwitch when it hit Book Outlet shelves. I was intrigued by it in January and February when there's kinds of crazy mad hype. I'm glad that I'm going to be reading it when the hype has died down a little bit. I am curious about the world. I'm really curious about the female friendships because that's really important to me, and I'm glad I have it. I've got a nice hardbound cover. And for those of you who know Book Outlet well, I don't have any of the marking dots, which means this did not stay in their warehouse long, so that feels really cool and awesome. I also have The Gracekeepers by Kirsty Logan. Now this has also made its rounds on BookTube. I know that Jen Campbell absolutely loves this, and I am excited to pick it up. It sounds odd. It kind of sounds almost theater of the absurd. The plot line being that it's sometime in the future in which most of the world has been flooded, and some people live in the water and some people live on land, and I think the 2 main characters, one buries bodies and one is in a traveling circus. And that's kind of all I know about this. I know that it's well loved on BookTube, although I've heard some folks who haven't loved it, so I will be interested to make my own opinion, but I am really embracing kind of absurd stories and stories that are a little off. That's kind of what I'm really interested in right now, so I'm curious to be picking up The Gracekeepers soon. And it wouldn't be me if I didn't buy a cookbook at some point. I really love cookbooks, so I got Whole Foods to Thrive, Nutrition Dense Plant-Based Recipes for Peak Health, and this is by Brendan Brazier. Now he is a really well-known endurance athlete. He started as a runner, he's now a triathlete. He's also vegan. He started the Vega products of like protein powders and things like that that are also all vegan. And I am not a vegan. I was a vegetarian. I'm now a pescatarian because I can't eat dairy. It's a very long story, but basically I have a weird diet and have to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables without any animal products, and so this I think will help give me some nutrition ideas and some more basically like just recipes because, you know, food is delicious. Then we have the first and only collection of short stories I've gotten so far this year, and that is The Hall of Small Mammals by Thomas Pierce. Now I heard about this from Book Riot, and it was described as Southern magical realism short stories. I am Southern. I like magical realism. I'm not really sure how I feel about short stories, so I feel like this is a good place to start. Then we have a book that has been recommended to me by some different people, both online and offline, and that is The Library at Mount Char. Now, this has been described to me as kind of like His Dark Materials, but creepier and with more books. So I'm like, all right, I'm on the creepy train apparently, so I'm here for that. I think that there's a girl who grows up kind of isolated with her father, and she thinks her father might be God, and she has to protect this like sacred library maybe. That's kind of the feeling I get. Denise Marie said it was interesting, and so I'm happy to read this so we can talk about it, but I am curious because libraries, and I basically love books about books about books. Also, any kind of overt or implicit religious imagery makes me excited because I study religion academically, so I'm excited to see what this is going to have in store. And now for the single book I am most excited to read, because as soon as I saw it on Book Outlet, I was like, yes, I don't even know why I don't own this yet. And that is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. Apparently it's the haul of V.E. Schwab books. This cover, you guys, this cover, this cover is so beautiful. It is so my aesthetic. I love this. I've heard nothing but fantastic reviews of this. I love following V.E. Schwab's Twitter, so I'm excited to see how that acerbic wit that I see on Twitter translates into a novel, especially an adult novel. I think young adult and adult have very different levels of sarcasm you can use, so I'm curious about this. I know that so many people love these characters, and I think the third one comes out in January or February, so I won't have that long to wait. I also have The Wrath and the Dawn. This is by Renee Ahdieh? I don't know, I'm sorry if I butchered your name. I've heard this described as a kind of retelling of 1001 Arabian Nights, but darker. I'm very curious about this. I've heard both hugely positive reviews of the duology and also people who were not in love with it, so I'm really excited to make my own opinion. I'm also excited to read some fantasy that takes place outside of sort of the Western hemisphere and is in a non-white dominant culture with an own voice writing. Those are all things I'm very excited about and I know that I need to work on, so this is a great place to start. And finally, my last book is All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders. I really am curious about this book because it got a ton of hype on Book Riot, it got a ton of hype on like NPR. I found it really interesting because when this came out and booktubers were reviewing it, I found that people who tended to read genre fantasy, so they were invested in fantasy as a genre, they'd read widely, did not like this book. And people who tended to read more literary fiction and not really read a lot of fantasy loved this book. So I am really curious about what goes on in the story that makes all the people who don't really read fantasy enjoy it and all the people who do read fantasy not like it as much. So I'm curious on that level. This is a story of two friends, a boy and a girl, who as children discover that the girl is a witch and the boy is into science. It fast forwards to the future where the boy has created a time machine where they can travel forward 2 seconds in time, and the girl is a witch and they have to work together to stop the impending doom of the world. I find all of that a fascinating premise, especially with witchcraft and science working alongside one another in a story. They are often separated. And again, I'm just really curious why all the literary folks seem to love this and all the genre fantasy folks seem to not love it so much. So I will be picking this up hopefully before the end of the year. And that is it. I'm not going to even try to hold all of these books. Those are the 22 books that I have hauled for this summer. Please comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these. These are all fresh to me. The only one I've actually read is The Raven Boys. I really am looking forward to each of these books. If you have any recommendations on where I should get started, please let me know. Hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys have great books to read, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!